All right, so today we are continuing with cryptography. Last time we talked about Caesar ciphers, monoalphabetic ciphers, one-type pad, Binet ciphers, and we ended with Playfair ciphers, which I don't know why they're not on here. Oh, there they are. And then also double transposition ciphers. I also talked about the threat model space here. Data can be in a lot of places. Cryptography tries to really protect it in all these places. And this is our basic definition of cryptography. Reminding everybody where we were. The key points on this is that we have a plain text, which is almost always called P. We have ciphertext. And then we use encryption to switch plain text to ciphertext, and decryption to go the other way around. And we often use a key. These are important. We talked about stream and block ciphers. So a stream cipher is you can translate each letter and as it comes in. Imagine a human across a telegram. Block ciphers, you need a set of those characters, and then you use an algorithm or permutation on the set to produce the outcome. All right, I'm covering this because we're about to get more complicated, and I want to make certain everyone's on the same position. We also talked about substitution and permutation. These are similar but different. Substitution being where I swap out the letters, permutation being where I more swap around the letters. Okay. I'm going to go back to Playfair because I don't think I gave you a detailed enough example. On the website, there is a handout with some Playfair examples on it. I'm going to walk you through this, then we're going to do a pause, and we're all going to try to figure out what I've encrypted on the Playfair handout, and then we'll move on. The reason I'm doing this is because today we're going to be partially talking about a concept called information diffusion. I will get further into this concept later, but the main point is I want the information in one letter to spread through the entire set. And it doesn't make sense. I'm going to go slow when we hit there. But this is the simplest example I have of information diffusion in Playfair. This is why we're spending time on this. So Playfair, we already presented this. It's an early block cipher. The way we start by creating this grid. So we pick a key. In this case, the key I have picked is Playfair example. You take all the letters, you pull Playfair all the way up to the top. So play F. Oh no, A has gone missing because we already used A. E, X, A also went missing. P went missing. L went missing. And E is also missing over here. So Playfair example, all the letters for it have been pulled up to the front. We now have grid. Part I already talked about, so we're going faster through this. Then I play with my plaintext. So my plaintext here was hello world, but encryption, there's some bad stuff here. One, there's a double repeated letter. We do not like patterns in cryptography. They make it easier to break stuff. And double repeated letters also have patterns in English. So another way to break things like Caesar cipher is just look for repeating letters. So we don't like those. So in the Playfair example, we have to kind of muddle with our plaintext. So first off, we add an X between all repeating letters. We break all the letters into two sets. And if we have the wrong number of letters at the end, we add an X at the end. All right, now we have our plaintext. Now we have to do the encryption. So in Playfair, we have three rules. The rules are based on these pairs. So we start with our first pair of letters, HE. We have to find those two letters. So here's H and here's E number, right? And then we use them to draw a box. So one corner of the box is on E, one corner of the box is on H. We then go across the box to the furthest letter in the row. So H now becomes D, and E becomes M. All right. So now we have the first two letters of our ciphertext, DM. We are following, there are three different rules for doing this. The rectangle happens the most often. It's the one I just showed you. We're about to do rectangle several times, and then I will show you another one. Here it is again. Our next letters are L and X. So here's L, here's X. X becomes R, L becomes Y. Did I do that wrong?
I have no idea.
No, I did it right. I said it wrong. Because L is first. L becomes Y, and then X becomes R. Do it again. Our next two letters are LO. So since L is first, L becomes A, O becomes N. Again, now our two letters are W, O, so W becomes B, O becomes Q. And then, whoops, we don't have a box anymore. So we have to fall down to one of the other rules. So the two other rules are columns and rows. In this case, we're a column. So what we're going to do is we're going to just move one letter down. And if we're at the bottom of our grid, we wrap up to the top. So in this case, our first letter is R. So R becomes C, and L becomes R. And then we end up with CR. And then I'm just going to save us all the name. And now we have our ciphertext. DM, YR, AN, BQ, CRG.
So how do we get the ciphertext?
Well, I've been building it for the last several slides. So every single slide we picked a new ciphertext for. See how it's being built each time?
Yeah.
That's how we get our ciphertext. Reversing this, if you think about it for a few minutes, should be easy because you just do it backwards. I'm not going to go into that. There's a couple nice points though about this cipher method. So first off, we're not replacing a single letter with a single letter anymore, are we? We're doing information fusion at a very tiny scale. Because there are several cases here where we have an L. So if I back up to our L points, like here's LX. So here L became Y, but when L was combined with O, it became an A. So what's happening is the information stored in each letter is being distributed to neighboring ones. We call this information diffusion. Caesar cipher has zero information diffusion. You just literally one letter. Draggle transposition ciphers, again, zero information diffusion. One letter. Same thing with one-time paths. One letter. We're not getting that information flowing out. Play Player is one of the first ones I have shown you where it actually does start spreading that information out across by doing a block cipher. This is also an example of a substitution that is not a string cipher. So what you're looking at here is a substitution using a block cipher. You're probably thinking like, Candy, why have you been showing me these as if they're different? They are different. We just have been learning them simple and same. All right. To pound some of these lessons into you, sometimes it's just much easier for me to show you what happens when you do this the wrong way. So we're going to go through two examples. One of them, one's a substitution and one is a permutation. Both are done wrong. Just going to double check. This is working too well, so I'm making sure I'm recording. I'm recording. Okay. Here, go ahead. The recording software and this clicker in remote each other. All right. This is one of the most common suggestions and one of the worst ideas. This is also a beautiful example of what I ended lecture with before. Because before I talked about how it's a bit different how we did this with telegrams than how we do this with computers. Most of the examples I've been showing you thus far look closer to the telegram or the letter version, which had a human in the middle kind of doing some stuff. When we take that human out, suddenly we develop a whole mess of problems we did not have before. This is a good example of this. So a lot of people are like, why don't I just XOR things? Wouldn't it be much, computers are awesome at XORing. It's like built all the way to the CPU, fast, without speed. So let's just go and take a repeating key, and let's just XOR all the text against it. And what you get back out looks like garbage. And I got a good question the other day of, well, you can tell something's encrypted because you can just pull up the network traffic and it looks like arbly, right? You can tell something happens to the text, but you can't tell if it's been encrypted. This is super easy. Here I've taken our Margaret Atwood text and I have XORed it with a key. I will not tell you what it is, but you guys talk to your neighbor and tell me what my key is. Also, think about why you can tell. Talk. You're allowed to talk. This is not a thinking by yourself. Have a chat with your neighbor.
What do we do here? How do we do this?
the most common character in ASCII or in English, right? We put space everywhere. Does anyone know off the top of their head what the ASCII code is for space?
32?
It's
Oh, it is 32. Oh my god.
it's almost all zeros. What happens when I XOR a number against a bunch of zeros? What do I get back?
Yeah, that's good.
The same thing. That means that every single time one of my key letters got XORed with a space, what happened functionally is it changed whether it's an uppercase or a lowercase. And statistically speaking, since spaces are so common, and because the letters SECURITY were so common, I get this output, in which the T is now actually the most frequent letters in my output. Do not use XOR as an encryption method. But the other minor lesson here is just thinking about your underlying data. This would never happen in the other ciphers because we threw all the spaces out. Your computers, you can't throw the spaces out. And they did it for a lot of reasons before us. Time on wire, but this is what can happen.
So the spaces in the plain text exposed to
Because they XOR the key with plain text, or with the plain text space. Because space is the most common character, and it was the most likely one to be XORed with them, and then we get this frequency diagram. All right. Okay, this is me just writing down numbers. All right, that was example one. We're now on example two. So example one, I was making fun of a substitution cipher, basically, and thinking about this. Here we're talking about block cipher. So the block cipher I have taught you is trivial. It was good back in the 1800s. And we are actually going to keep using this to some degree, but I want to make a clear problem with it. Block ciphers are done in blocks. Blocks are a fixed length. Playfair's blocks are 2. These blocks are, 4 by 3. Whatever your block size, it is a fixed length. Now, when I talk about blocks, is you're kind of shuffling things around, and you're doing a little tiny bit of information diffusion, but most of the information you're doing is based on a letter positioning. And the diffusion is really the relative position of the letters within the block. Some of the more advanced crypto techniques will talk about basically trying to do diffusion between blocks. What happens if we don't? So here's plain text. Maybe I'm trying to say attack at dawn, then break off attack at dawn. I've got it in these blocks. And then my cipher at the other end has this string, that string, and wow, the same string again. Because information diffusion is not happening. So basically, then break off, this information is not being spread to the sides. And so now I can see that duplicated pattern. Let me do it that graphically. This is called the EBC penguin. What happens when block ciphers don't mix text between blocks? On the left, you have the plain text. On the right, you have the cipher text. Note that is not an artistic rendering. It is actually the cipher text. What has happened is we've encrypted this pen with AES 128, which is good crypto, and then we turned off the advanced stuff that I haven't covered yet, which is a bad idea. If you zoom in, you can literally see the blocks. What has happened here is exactly what happened with the space. What happens if I take a bunch of white content and move it around? So if I take the color white and the color white, and I kind of just like move them around in a block, what am I going to get? White. Because I have no internal anything to deal with. I'm just moving stuff in circles. So if you don't do information diffusion, where that black piece over there kind of starts trickling over to this side, you end up with this situation in which you can very, very clearly see the penguin, even though technically it has been encrypted. The main point here is that modern encryption is done by computers. We can no longer just throw out all the spaces or drop a couple letters off the side and forget that J exists. And now we have to deal with some of these realities. All right, last year I covered hashing in more depth in the next lecture, and this caused horrendous confusion when I started going through SP networks. So we're about to go through, it sounds like a side tangent back into hashing, but I'm actually trying to prep you for SP networks, which is what we're covering next. Integrity and authenticity are quite important. Confidentiality is the goal of most of the ciphers I've talked about so far. So most of the time when we're trying to encrypt something, we're trying to hide it. But sometimes we don't care about hiding it. Sometimes we just want to make certain that someone knows it's from us and not from someone else. So for this section, I'm focusing on integrity, not confidentiality. And when we talk about integrity and not confidentiality, then we start worrying a little bit more about hashes, because hashes let us do some nice stuff. Do you remember this from passwords? Hashes are one way. I take the plain text, I put them in a hashing algorithm, I get some hash text out, and I cannot go backwards. Very important that I cannot go backwards. This is AES 256. I've taken it from plain text and turned it into ciphertext. This is what happens when I hash it. Wow, those are different lengths. It would have taken a computer a lot of effort to go through and do all the ciphertext here, but hashing is actually less effortful sometimes. Keep in mind that some of our computers are getting quite small. We use these all over the place where we want to pull down a really, really big file. And maybe we want to be able to do things like air checking in the middle. So we want the computer to maybe break this file up, send it down. If it notices one byte different, maybe go back up, come back down, manage things normally. And then we want to make sure we got the right one. So often in download sites, you'll see this little box on the side with, would you like to check the hash? A lot of times it's MD5, this one happens to be SHA-56. And it's just saying, okay, once you get the file downloaded, you can hash it and tell me whether or not it's the same. This is also done by things like rsync, which allows you to remotely send files up to another server. What it will do is it will run, I haven't worked with rsync in a while. I think it does hashing on both sides and basically does some comparisons to the hash of the file and its date to decide whether or not I have a really big file here, I have a really big file there. Should I send it? Well, it's cheaper to send a hash and just see, are they the same? This is just me doing a bunch of SHA hashing on a command line just to make the point. You can see here where I go and I hash this index file, and then I edit it, and then I hash it again, and now it's not the same hash, right? EBE versus 4AE. I forget what I edited, but it would have been tiny. Even a tiny change, big change. Okay. This should be sort of old news thus far. This is a copy of the password one. I have put it here mostly just for your reference. We're moving on. All right. Threat models. Our threat model in this case is a remote online attacker that does not have access to Alice or Bob, but can break the connection between. Our attacker might take something like the phrase attack at dawn with this hash, throw it away, try to write do not attack with another hash, and send it to Bob. Now, if we are not doing anything to protect that hash, they'll just swap it out. Think back to this. You just downloaded the file, and then you're going to pull the hash down over the exact same connection. You've got the attacker in the middle. What's stopping them from switching out the hash? So here we have this problem because anyone can make a hash. So like I send the message, it sends a hash. Is it from me? Is it from Charlie? I don't know. We've just broken integrity, and this is the threat model we're looking at, a remote attacker. So one of the ways we do this is we add keys back into hashing. Now we haven't been using keys in hashing thus far, so you're like, Dr. Vanny, there is no key element for that hash. But let's roll back time a little bit and talk about how banks used to do this long ago. So banks had to send everything in the clear, they send it over the telegraph. Literally anyone who can cut a tile wire can intercept this, it's not hard. And you do not want the person cutting a telegraph wire, just switching out bank account numbers everywhere. This could be a problem. And so what they did is they built a very rudimentary hash. What they would do is they would have a key, which is this table. So this table was printed out and shared with all the banks. Then what you do is you take the amount of money that you wanted to send between the two banks and you use that to look up some numbers. So in the millions place, let's say you want to transfer 376,514. So there is no millions, so you pick the 0 here for 53. And the 100,000s position is a 7. So you put 7 here, and you put 47, and you keep doing this, and then you add all the numbers you came up with together. And this will produce a very short code of 207. So then they would send across this message. They'd add 207 to the end. The recipient bank would then run the calculation again and say, well, does it match? And if so, yes, I will transfer this money. This is a simple but very effective way of doing hashing effectively on a bank transaction. Old way. All right, so the way we're going to do it in modern times is we use a key. And what we do is we just add it to the plain text. I mean, you can literally do this as an appending. You can just take the key and append it onto your plain text, for example. Because even a singular character change will have a big impact. Then we hash it and we get the hash function out. So, that's right. Apologies, I was focused on playfair example this morning. I did not prep this one as much as I normally do, so I'm like practically trying to remember how this all works. I'm going to switch to front finally. So there are a lot of ways to do a hash-based message authentication code. The most trivial of which would be you just take the key, stuff it on the front of the message, and hash the lot of it. However, that perhaps is not the best. If your attacker has any sense of what your message actually is, they may be able to reverse that. So we'd rather have some amount of information dispersion. This is a simple example I got out of Ross Anderson's book. So the idea here is that you take your key, you break it into two keys, key 1, key 2. You just divide it in half. Treat key 1 like it was a salt and hash the message. So the same way we do with passwords, where we take the message, we take the key, we concatenate them, we do that. And this produces ciphertext 1. We take ciphertext 1 and key 2 and we XOR them. We don't end up with our weird problem we had with spaces here because we were XORing a hash. So we already have something that it's not truly random, but it has a lot of properties of a random characters as opposed to the way you would normally get this. Then we send the message C2. We assume that our recipient already has the key. Since the recipient already has this key and is perfectly capable of breaking it in half to key 1 and key 2 already, they can verify the message by doing the same computation. So they similarly go and hash it and then XOR it. An attacker without key 1 and key 2 are going to have a lot of trouble brute forcing C2 because the information from the key is being used in a couple places, especially if that key is being XORed against the entire hash. All right. This is an HMAC, so a hash-based message authentication code for Margaret Atwood text using the key security. The hash here is ciphertext. Yeah, and so if I were sending this, I would be sending both the plain text on the left and I would be sending the hash on the right, and I'd send them at the same time. And that's fine because if if Charlie here, my attacker, sees this, it doesn't have the key. So this is the threat model this is meant to protect against. Alice sends an HMAC attack at dawn with the security key, produces this hash. Charlie throws it away but doesn't have the key. It just assumes, well, this must be just a normal SHA-1. Charlie has never needed to know what's in the message because Charlie's just throwing it away. So they create a new key And so they just try a normal to SHA-1 hash, do not attack the hash that they send it to Bob. Bob was like, there was supposed to be a key here. Hashes this and goes, this is an invalid message. And this is how this is supposed to work. All right, this is a bit weird because we've been talking about hashing for passwords. So I have put up a side by side here briefly. When we hash for passwords, the password hash hopefully stays secure. So in our attacker is on the remote server model, we don't assume that the hash is secure. Anyone could rewrite it. In a password situation, we have locked down the hash and it is on our system, and we're hoping desperately that no one's stolen it. And as a side effect, we don't worry about the hash itself's integrity. So as a result, in password hashing, we assume an integral hash. In message hashing, we assume that the hash can never messed with. And this is why we do different behaviors. This is why we don't bother with the key on our own server, because where would I store the key on my server? On the server, because I need to decrypt this password file all the time. And so, and we're also just trying to prove different things. Method hashing is trying to prove integrity. Password hashing is trying to prove authentication. Knowledge.
Wait, what's the key difference again?
They're bullet points.
I mean, I read the bullet points, but it's still.
With password hashes, you're assuming that the hash is staying on your machine. You don't assume the attacker has attacked your hash. And a message hash, you have to assume your attacker may have attacked your hash. And this is the root point that causes all the other changes. So you need a key, for example, in message hashing because you have to prove integrity. You do not need to prove integrity with password hashes because your integrity is being proved by your authentication and access control systems. And so they are used differently. Yeah, these are just a couple examples of how you might use them. Okay, I thought I had a slide, but apparently it's not here. The other thing you can use a hash for is to make something longer. So hashes, remember we talked briefly about how hash tables, if you did them right, you're lucky, you have order of one lookup. You can do that because a hash produces a fixed length output every single time, always the same thing. It doesn't matter if you put in a terabyte of data or you put in a single character, you will still get a fixed length amount of data. When we're dealing with keys, it's really lovely to have fixed lengths. So one of the tricks we sometimes use hashes for is we take bits of a key, maybe only a couple of characters out of the key, we feed them into a hash algorithm, and we use this to do key expansion. And that will come up in a minute. All right. Any questions about hashes? All right, we're going to move into SP networks. SP networks are a theoretical stepping stone I'm going to give you before we hit more complicated things like DES. So SP networks aren't real, or a certain someone's implemented it somewhere, but you will not find it in the main systems anywhere. But they are vastly easy to understand as a theoretical concept. And the main algorithms like AES and DES use something similar enough that this is a good mental step. All right, we've been talking about substitution and permutation as if they're different things, or they are different things. And when you do them differently, you think, okay, why are we doing these differently? Because they've got opposite weaknesses. Clearly, we should put them together. That's a brilliant thing to do. It's called an SP network. So an SP network is called a substitution permutation network. So what you're looking at here is across the top, this might be a pile of letters coming in. They go into a substitution box. They then go into a permutation and into a different substitution box. And we keep doing this a whole bunch of times. When people are doing this by hand, we tend to do it in one step because people take a lot of time. When computers do this, one of our options is just do it 26 times or 200 times or however many times we feel like doing this. I just really mix it up and make it very, very hard for cryptanalysts to go back and fix. So let me walk through a bit of examples. So one of the big reasons we do this is information dispersion. That thing I've been kind of briefly mentioning here. So the idea here is I take my key and I break it up. So I take maybe the first part of the key and I use that to inform my S box. And then I take another part of the key and I use that to inform what these wires should look like. And then another part of the key. So each part of the key is kind of being fed sideways into this SP network. More rounds, more intact. Let's do this using our already known things. So we're kind of, again, don't do this in reality. But we're stepping stoning our way up.
Sorry, is this kind of analogous to the Allies' improvement of the Enigma machine in World War II? Because the issue was that originally it could never be the same letter, and then the Allies figured that out and have their own version.
Well, the Allies and the Enigma machine situation, I'm trying to address my knowledge of history now. They use the fact that the
Same letter.
Well, it's the same letter, but they actually knew the contents of the message.
Yeah.
So one of the first things that they would send out in the morning is like, I think, the weather.
Yeah, and then they'd always end off with the same two letters. But
yeah,
what I was curious about though is they figured out there was a flaw where the same letter mapped to itself. That was the other part of it. And then when they made their own version of the machine, they fixed that one flaw. So the letter could randomly map to itself as well, based on it. So
because they were making sure it couldn't accidentally map to itself, so that's an obvious thing. That's also a bad idea. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't have enough data from the Enigma machine to answer the question. It's a short version. This is theoretical. Okay, so what we're looking at here is we start with our message, which is just the word security repeated twice. I'm doing this on purpose because I'm trying to show you off the information dispersion component. Here's our key. I have broken it up. So it has 5, 34, 8, 9, 21, and 3. I have totally made this up off the top of my head. This key is then fed into the side of this. So it's pretty clear how I've used 5 in a Caesar cipher, right? I've used a shift with 5. Think of 34 as kind of a lookup as to which shift mechanism to use. In this case, we're just doing a shift where the first bit of the block goes to the first next block, the second bit goes to the first bit. So like this block is now the first character of each of the following blocks. You could use a different shift in there. And then I do a Caesar cipher. All right. It's showing up terribly on the screen, but I've now colored a couple letters red. So I think I picked C up here. So if you take C here, C is going to come out as H. H is going to come over here, go in as H, and come out as P. So my information diffusion here is terrible, other than its positionality. And this is just me doing it again. So a second, I might get a second round. Now I'm taking the latter 3 parts here. I feed a 9 in, I do a 9 on the Caesar cipher. I take a different method of transposition from 21, and then I do the Caesar cipher. Here's B out the other side. Now, if I run a frequency analysis on this, I will get the same shape as I would for my original message because I'm doing a straight up flip flop. Okay, but we're starting easy, everyone's kind of understanding what this is doing. Now let's use Playfair. Because I talked about how Playfair does a small amount of information dispersion. So here I've done the exact same thing, it's just I've swapped this out as the Playfair example. So C comes in, but C now impacts 2 letters, right? Because it's in a pair. So the information in C is now in D and in P. All right, D heads out and is now in this block. P heads out and is now in that block. And now they both impact their neighbor again. So now E, C, R, and Z all have information that started in C. Another way of thinking this is if I had made a mistake when transposing or when writing out my message and I'd written the wrong letter for C, that longness would now be in all of these letters now. If I do another round, this time I'm using a different method of kind kind of moving letters around. Here are my starting ones, so E, C, R, V. They come down, because I'm just using this side shift this time, they actually stay within their blocks, but they impact all their neighbors. So now, I'm going to jump back really quick. So when I was doing this with the Caesar cipher, so I do security at the top, right? So it is nice in the security, even though they're repeated, you don't see a repeated message here. So when I did it with just the transposition, you would have seen a repeated ciphertext. The dispersion is causing that to not occur. And when we go back to the Playfair example, not only is it not occurring, the letters on this side now don't match the letters on that side at all. If I were to run this as a frequency diagram, you would now see the letter security forming a different pattern than the letters I've got on the other side. And this is information dispersion. All right, everyone still listening? Okay, good. That's information dispersion what we didn't do with the penguin. So if we had been doing that with the penguin, we would have gotten a fuzzy mess up the other side instead of a penguin. Okay, this is where I put the hash stuff. One thing we do is we use hashing to do key stretching. So key stretching is where we take maybe the tiny key, like A, and we use it to make a bigger thing. Why would we want to do that? Well, this SP network I just showed you, I'm breaking my key up, aren't I? And depending on how much key I'm willing to share and send between people, because if I was willing to send between people infinite length keys, I go back to 110 that. It's much better than all of this. It's faster, it's more secure. Key sharing is annoying, and we'll talk a bit more about that Monday. But I usually don't have infinite length keys. And because of that, I kind of have to use as much of the key as I can. So I'll take maybe a piece out, I'll feed it to a hash, I'll get a bigger hash out, and then I'll use my hash in whatever part of the SP network I'm trying to use it in. So thus far I was talking about things like Playfair and Caesar, but you can imagine doing just an XOR even against this expanded DES. Alright, I'm actually going to do this much faster than I thought because I thought I had more big pair share stuff in here, and I did not.
You didn't do this in Crash Share.
Huh?
You didn't do this in Crash Share.
Yeah, we did. I had one and then I took it out. And I thought I had another one and I don't have it.
Let's do DES.
I'm not going to do that to you because I think pair share has a lot of thinking in it. And I'm trying to decide if I want to do something like this to you here with SP networks. Oh, because I forgot to go do the handout. That's what happened.
Oh.
All right, well, there's a handout. You can go do Playfair on your own in the handout. I'm sorry, I meant to pause at the end of Playfair and do that where you could all practice doing this to kind of understand kind of how these things work. That's why I'm running ahead of time. That makes more sense. And I'm just trying to think about if a good think pair share I can drop in here to kind of make sure everyone has gotten this concept.
The handouts we're trying to say for page.
That's even more of a problem. Okay, I will deal with that issue later. Okay, I'm going to advance to DES, and then I may come, after a little bit of DES, I may come back to this slide and then try something that we can think about. So DES. DES is another thing you should not use. It used to be the main standard. I'm going to do a quick jump ahead to explain why you should not use it, and then I will go backwards again. I did a little bit of searching this morning on Canada's history because most of the history here is US based. The short version is Canada and the US were pretty much in alignment on this, and therefore I'm just mostly presenting the US version. We long term have had a lot of discussion back and forth on whether or not cryptography should be happening. To quote a police officer in the United Kingdom, there should be nowhere that a police officer cannot go to enforce the law. This is their opinion. and encryption creates a space in which a police officer cannot go to enforce the law. And so the police, for a very long time, have wanted an easy way to undo encryption. They can smash locks, for example. They can use cutters on locks if they have to. They can require someone to go and open a door, for example, if a judge says so. How come they can't open a hard drive? And so this has been going back and forth for a very long time. Keep in mind that most encryption research, circa 1975, when DES came out, was funded by the military. All of my examples have this weird little military theme to them, right? Because a lot of this was used by the military, because they're the biggest group that wants to be able to send a message between 2 points and where they think somebody might actually break it. The love letter example I gave you with the letter blocks, that's more what you get from the general population. But when it comes to encryption, most of this is done by banks and done by the military. So when our cryptographers started producing things that were of high value, the first thing the military did was panic and say, do you really, really want to send this out across the entire planet? What if our insert enemy at the time starts encrypting all their stuff using strong encryption, and now what are we going to do? And so a lot of encryption algorithms in the 70s were heavily locked down. There was export controls on them. I'm going to so into this. The reason there's a t-shirt sitting here is that there was a stupid loophole in the law called an art form. And if you were doing art, that's not export control, but code is export control. But where's an algorithm sitting? And so you had a lot of groups trying to do artistic expressions of there's a lot of history here. But finance really wanted this. They're like, I want to be able to send transactions across the ocean. I want to be able to send transactions and make sure no one is messing with it. We really need this encryption. And this caused a huge tension between the military and the public, and that resulted in DES. DES has a whole pile of weird stuff in it. Most of the weird stuff was added by the NSA. I'll go back to DES. DES has a suspiciously short key. No one has yet really explained why 56 bits was the number that everyone arranged to. This is what the NSA has decided was allowed under export controls. 8 bits of that are also parity bits, so they're not actually part of the key. And let's see. Trying to figure out if I missed anything else in there. In 1999, the EFF collaborated with some public groups to break DES in 22 hours and 15 minutes. When they say break, that means that you take an encrypted message and you figure out the plain text in 22 hours. We consider DES to be broken. Broken simply means that modern computers have hit the point where we can decode this. Don't use DES. But as we're slowly crawling through history of encryption as a way of learning encryption, this is a very important one to learn. And if you look to the right, wow, that looks a bit like an SPL. So, trying to think if I have a better slide here. Sometimes I approach this from different angles and I forget the slide number. But you're basically looking at an SP network here. You take a sub key, so part of the key. You take half of a block. So DES is a block cipher. So it's taking a block and then it divides the block in half, and then it does a substitution basically on only half the block. And so the idea here is you have a half block, you have the sub key, you bring them together. I think this is an XOR. Then you send them down through a whole bunch of substitution cipher components, and you get things out. This actually looks like it's encryption and plain text being version. This is also an encryption algorithm that is done in rounds. Up till now, we have not talked about rounds, but the idea is you have a 64-bit input. This is, I believe, the current plain text. It goes through a permutation. Then it goes through round one, which is taken from the key. So the key is fed into, I'm just going to call it a hash algorithm. If you read about this thing properly, you'll discover I don't actually mean that, but effectively a hash algorithm is expanded. So it takes the key, it breaks it up, it hashes it, but it does a key expansion. It generates a set of keys, key one, key two, key through key n. And then it sends each key to each round. And then it swaps, for some reason, the two sides, and does another permutation. Okay, if we dive into each round looks basically like this. So the ciphertext is divided in half. Plain text and ciphertext kind of get muddled when you're in the middle of an encryption algorithm. So when I say ciphertext here, I mean that the plain text has gone through at least a permutation at this point and has now been converted to a form of ciphertext, but we're not at the final ciphertext yet. So it is broken into a left and right half. The left half is simply set down to this XOR and preserved, and then the right half goes through an expansion. The bits kind of switch. It goes to an expansion. It takes that key, whatever key it is, in the side. It uses that to again do the computation. Goes to a pile of substitution boxes. It produces a 32-bit output, right? This, and then it takes the left half and winds that again to do another computation on the other end. We are rapidly hitting the point in which Cami is not a cryptographer. But this is what cryptographers do all day, is they sort out how to do this and all the math behind them. And if you really think this is awesome, I heavily recommend Long's course if she's teaching it. I'm going to see if I can fit AES into this class. I will look it up. AES is our modern version. AES, okay, if I'm doing the hand-wavy version of encryption, it's not that different from DES in terms of the fact that it's using substitutions, it's using key expansions, it's using a lot of these components. But the insides are very much different and better.
When you're doing an SP network, is there a cycle to it? Like, how many times do you have to do the same operation before you get it?
So the number of times you run through the operation is dictated by the operating tree. In DES, I think it's you do 16 rounds. Just straight up.
Like is there a number of rounds that you can use to get it to the next step?
Yeah, you invert it. So this is the encryption algorithm. There's also a decryption algorithm, which is broadly speaking an inversion of this. Because I feel like going at my normal speed, I would spend all day on nothing but DES, and I would much rather go teach you about public-private key encryption on Monday. This is why we are not diving too deep here, and I'm spending a lot more time on SP networks, because I imagine the majority of this class isn't and should never be implementing this stuff. And you should just know enough to understand why keys are vitally important, how they are being used, and what good encryption even looks like. Also, we haven't talked about asymmetric and symmetric keys yet, but that will come out. Like you'll look at this and go, oh, okay, that's obviously why this is the way it is. I expect the majority of this class to never build encryption, and I expect a lot of you though to have to use it. The number of people in this room that will have to use an encryption library, that may have to set up a TLS connection, that might have to do things like that is quite large. So most of my training is aimed at that direction. That's why we're not going into DES and some of the more advanced stuff too. But this is well documented. If you care, go on to Wikipedia. They have an awesome article description of this. Go find your favorite YouTube video. They go into great depth. And these methods are very much based on the concepts in SP networks. They're obviously doing things different here. They're thinking a lot about things like breaking the blocks apart, kind of where they go, how long each key is coming in. There's a lot of components here around randomness and information diffusion, and a lot of the math is sitting around things like information diffusion. character comes in the top, how many other things does it impact? So, one of the first questions I get is, well, DES isn't too strong, the NSA kind of struggle with. What if we just ran it twice? This seems like a brilliant plan. Okay, this is why one, you never invent encryption methods without a skilled cryptographer who's willing to do all the statistical math to tell you whether or not this is a good idea or not. So don't ever just do this. But the answer actually is that applying it twice does work if you use different keys. So if you apply DES once with one key and then you run it again the second key, you actually get an improved output. Basically, it improves it to about a 57 key length worth of encryption value. You'll see that a lot of times in encryption, they'll specify the key length. And the key length is one determiner of just how much randomness you have in there. So like there's AES 128, AES 256, and you see them kind of increasing these as computers get stronger and better. IT is obviously 2. Let's put it on 3 times. The short version, if you keep applying DES, you get diminishing returns, but you actually don't scuttle it. You don't destroy it. This is not always true. Sometimes if you apply an encryption algorithm twice to the same text, you will actually cause a statistical situation where it becomes easier to decrypt it, but that's not good with this. So if for some reason, but sometimes you'll see them running it 2 or 3 times, and the reason is because the US government wouldn't let them run something better, and it encouraged them that they could just run it a couple times instead.
Why is 3 so much better than 2?
So each time you do this, you basically give a different key length amount. Please don't ask me to run them out. I don't know the answer. It's a short answer. I copied this out of a book that knows what it's doing. But yeah, but the point is you don't double it. So running it twice, you start with a 56 character with several of them kind of missing, and you get a proper 57 character. Running it 3 times will give you roughly 112. But keep in mind you have to run this with different keys each time, which brings about all your key sharing problems. I kind of already covered this. This is just me zooming in on this shirt because it's got a nice barcode on it, so you can scan it for anywhere the person's walking and then get that algorithm out. All right, so I kind of explained why DES got scuttled. By scuttled, I mean the NSA went in and modified some of the bits of how this works. The way encryption algorithms are normally done is someone, a photographer who knows what they're doing, goes and invents an algorithm. Then they make it public. Often, after they make it public, there is a point of debate. Basically, this is how researchers often work. Someone proposes something, someone else writes a paper about how that first person missed an important thing, and we all just kind of throw stones at each other politely until we find a way to actually create something that's solved. The other way this is sometimes done is a group like the NSA will put out a call and basically say, we want to bless a new standard. Send us your stuff. And all those researchers that have been throwing stones at each other for a while will go and actually pull out their best thing, and they will send that to the NSA. And they'll say, use this. Look, I've written 4 papers on it. This other guy has written 4 papers about all the holes. We fixed all the holes. Here, do this. And then that standard will usually be taken on by someone. This is kind of why you see us talking a lot about DES, AES, all these different algorithms, and why you don't see us talking about whatever it is long was written yesterday.
Looking at it now, with the encryption standards and stuff, the U.S. government obviously still would be a large player, but we've got to a point where all these tech companies, luckily, are probably far more positioned to aid the researchers and to position themselves in a place where these things can be validated without the need of stamp approval of the NSA.
Yes, some large tech companies do this. And now we move again off the edge of my knowledge base because I don't pay attention to how this is managed. But large companies are managed, they form coalitions from this. So there's a bunch of things. So passkeys, I believe, more of like that, for example, is an entire coalition. That coalition is judged. The key point though is that before any of these are accepted, they're always vetted by a large number of cryptographers. If you're ever inventing one of these things by yourself and you don't have someone doing the math on the statistics, odds are someone will find something similar to our frequency diagrams that flow above the pole in the sky. Please use that and stuff. If we move through history here a little bit, I'm just giving this background because it's important, kind of. It wasn't until the 90s we started actually doing anything internet related, really. So the 70s, it was mostly banks sending stuff to banks or governments sending stuff to governments. A private individual would not have in the 70s sent a message via electronic, much of anything encrypted. If I look at the electronic correspondence to my grandparents, for example, they were all sent by a telegram. At best, they had the equivalent of a hash number. This was not used by the general public. And then in the late 90s or early 90s, this thing called Netscape Navigator, now known as Firefox, was invented. And now the general public was sending content. And not only content, they were sending credit cards. And they were sending bank communications and stuff that maybe actually should be protected. And so there was a lot of internal debate going back and forth, predominantly the US government, but it sounds like also inside of Canada, around, can we really keep this encryption standards protected and kind of hobbled? Because if we do, we're actually putting the general public at risk. Because what's the first thing attackers are going to go do? They're going to go find a nice backhoe. They're going to dig down, cut the wire, and sit in the middle of the wire without actually being an attacker. We don't want that, or a problem group, and we don't want that to happen. And so as a side effect, Bill Clinton signed in 1996 an order removing encryption from the munitions list and declaring software to not be a technology. But at this point, it now became possible to use encryption worldwide and share things that were being predominantly generated by the US or allies. And now we have hit Crypto Wars 2.0. We seem to be coming out of it a little bit, but the UK, for example, has been trying to really push a lot of laws saying that it must be possible to break into the side of these encryption models. I'm going to explain this in the 10,000 foot, and okay, I see a sentence in. Where are the keys? Where are the keys? Have you secured the keys? Where are the keys? How many physical police forces are in Canada? I don't know off the top of my head, but I guarantee you the law. Should every single one of them have in their back corner, next to like the hockey sticks, a server that has all of the encryption keys that can break into every single one of our messages? This is our problem. It is possible to make it such that you can go and see inside of these messages, but the moment you have done that, you have massively increased your attack surface.
There are some Canadian politicians who in the UK trying to push that through too, sadly.
I would not be surprised if maybe worldwide this is an ongoing debate.
Yeah.
The short version is the only way to do it would be to duplicate the keys. And once you've duplicated the keys, you've now doubled your attack surface. And that is problematic. And the number of people who need access to it is not small. Also, bluntly speaking, it's out there. You can go and create laws to your heart's content. But a lot of these things actually can be gone around via other methods, because again, end-to-end encryption, where are the ends? Does the end go all the way into the server database, or does it end at the end of the network connection? So a lot of the stuff, the other reason this has not gone forward is often governments are able to get the data they want by just asking the company to go within their own database and not need to break encryption, because the encryption is often not on the database. Probably going to end it out. Well, I'll finish my slides, but there's not many more. This is AES. I'm not going to go into AES, short version. You can look this up yourself. AES is an improved version of that. We did not let the NSA decide it. That's a good start. This is a rough diagram of how it functions. Wow, that looks like an SP network. Which it's going and it's taking in a key, it's doing a bit switch, it's doing some substitutions, it mixes columns, and it adds what it calls the round key. So it's basically doing an XOR or addition of a round key, and then it does this whole thing again. This one was nice in that it allowed a couple things. So first off, it allowed different key links. AES can expand up to newer key links, so it's kind of future proof versus DES is locked in at 56. You just cannot do more than that. And again, it still uses substitutions, transpositions, shifts, exclusive ORs, and addition. Because these are the things computers are good at. And you can even use longer than 256. All right, any questions on this? Can I just ask a quick question to get a sense of what's going on? How many of you have started the password game at all? A couple.
The other day, at the beginning of the week, I think I mentioned it.
I was working with your TA yesterday to try to solve a couple problems that were happening. One of which was that the VM itself apparently was not linked properly. It should now be linked, but it does not let me know. What I may do is next week have the TA basically run office hours during tutorial, where you can come in and try to just play the game. When we did an earlier version of this game with a completely different code set at Edinburgh, and we found that people could get through about 3/4 of the levels in about an hour, once the VM had been easily set up. So I may go and encourage everyone to go and show up for the tutorial time next week, and I'm trying to see if I can get a TA in at that time because it is that late. That may be helpful. I really encourage it. I like the game that was designed by one of my students for this. And it will get you in doing things like hashing, and it will get you in guessing passwords and writing very simple code. All right, thank you very much. That is it for today. I will see everyone on Monday.
The SP network stuff is really useful.